Welcome to my grandpa's train. Today on my temporary workbench is the 2904. This is a Pacific steam locomotive that was operated by Chicago Northwestern, and in fact is special because this would have been one of the locomotives that ran not only the route of the 400, but was a locomotive that would have been fired by my grandfather. In his locomotive records, he does have 2904 as one of the locomotives, as well as, I believe, the 2901. This locomotive belongs to my uncle, and so it's rather special to him because of that fact. However, this one doesn't run. This is an RSO model of the 462, and it needs a new motor because we put this on the test track and the magic smoke came out from the cab, and it's not supposed to do that. So what we're going to do is I ordered up a replacement motor kit from the old eBay, and we're going to open this up and see what's inside. So there's our motor and a whole book of instructions. Thank you for purchasing one of my motor kits. I'm sure you will be pleased with the improved performance of your locomotive. So there's pictorial instructions. That is excellent. So I'm going to go through this in a little bit, and there's an extra parts list. Alright, so we've got a motor. This is I think a 6-pole motor according to the listing, so this should be a very fine running motor. Now, as far as I can tell, this is the same motor that would be sold without the flywheel to go into this locomotive here. So what we're going to do is try to get this motor plus that flywheel into this engine and get some real nice performance out of it. Now I think it will fit. The motor is going to sit way back in the cab, so once I get it apart we'll figure out a way to make that work. Alright, I think someone's already been inside this, given this piece is out, and the front screw is already removed from the locomotive, so I just have to pop this back screw out from the cab. Not even sure this is the correct screw back here. It doesn't fit. Now the cab will come off like that, and then the entire boiler should come right off as well. And it does, and we can see this one has a nice heavy weight inside it. That's convenient. Alright, here's the original 3-pole motor. I guess these really weren't bad motors, but this one lets out the magic smoke. So what we're going to do is just replace that with the new can motor. Actually came out really easy. The magnets are really strong in this motor though, so I might end up putting this motor in one of my uncle's other locomotives if I can get this one to come back to life. I have this one here, which is pretty much the exact same locomotive but in a little worse shape, and this used to be a different road name because it's a 282, and this was never a Chicago Northwestern prototype as far as I know. Yeah, I should be able to drop this old motor into this locomotive. I might even get this one running before the 2904. Alright, I'm going to press the flywheel onto the motor, and the instructions say to leave about an 1/8 inch of space between the flywheel and the motor. I also found this this piece here. All I'm using this for is to protect the metal terminals from being crushed when I press it on in the vise here. And all I have to do is hold it in place and gently turn it until it presses it down, and it's not going to take much. Right about there is all it needs. As you can see, now it's pressed in all the way according to the instructions. And just spinning by hand, this is a very nice spinning motor, and the flywheel will add just that much better performance to it. Okay, so I have the motor put together and the locomotive is prepared and ready for the new motor to go in. So I ended up chopping out these plastic standoffs that would hold the old motor in place to make room for the flywheel. I also took the liberty of painting the motor black because that shiny silver would stand out inside the cab of the locomotive. But now it looks pretty good, I think. You won't be able to see it quite as much. So this will just slide into this piece of tubing like this. And as you can see, it just fits perfectly in the back of the cab. Can even go a little closer if I needed to. About like that. Now the terminals will be all the way inside the cab. So what I need to do now is I've got this foam mounting tape. This is the permanent stuff. And what I'm going to do is cut a couple squares. And I'm going to put a piece underneath the motor. Also, I had to modify this piece of lead weight. As you can see, it's quite shiny right here. I used a hacksaw and I cut it with my vise. And I notched it out a little further so that it fits around the flywheel, otherwise it would hit the flywheel. So the addition of the flywheel will make up for that difference in weight. The motor is now mounted and it does operate. So the next thing I have to do is reconnect the wires from the pickup points, which are here and here, and then tie them into the motor. Now this kit actually comes with a pair of wires. However, I'm not going to use those. I'm going to use this piece of wire. It's actually 22 gauge, which is a smidge heavier than that. I'm going to make both sides of it black so it kind of disappears in the cab. I don't want the red wire sticking out like a sore thumb. So I'm going to go ahead and solder this up. While I'm soldering, I'm going to also reinstall the headlight, which came off when I disconnected the old motor. Okay, so I have the motor and everything wired back on, and we'll test it out. I put a counterweight on the front so that it holds the front of the frame down. As it's lightweight plastic, the rear would pick it up. Alright, let's see what kind of performance this thing has now. I'm using my older Gilbert power pack. Lately I've been gravitating toward that more so. Let's see what we can do with this here. I think the wheels need to be cleaned a little bit. Very nice. So here's where this project sits right now. I have the motor installed and I have the flywheel and everything is hooked in. I had to do a lot of extra work on this to get it to fit. And I happen to have a spare locomotive and shell that's nearly identical to this one, so I can kind of show you the example of what's been done to it. So this is the same exact boiler plastic casting. The cab roof is removed. And underneath I had to modify this lead weight quite a bit. I actually had to cut it out to about here. You can see that's how it's been adjusted on this one. It's a lot shinier where I trimmed it. I had to remove these plastic standoffs for the flywheel to fit. This plastic piece, this bottom portion of the boiler plastic, has been a real problem on these because these, they were, I think, factory glued in place, but they fall out. There's nothing left to the glue, so they just fall out and they sag, and when they sag, these plastic trim pieces here rub on the drive wheels, and that was causing actually a lot of binding. When the drive wheels would spin, it would bind up. When I ran it without the shell, it ran fine, but putting this on, the shell on, it would bind up. So I ended up trimming these down quite a bit so that they would miss the wheels, and then I glued it back in place with plastic cement. However, the gluing it in place didn't hold. It fell out after I glued it, so I added a number 256 screw, and I screwed the plastic piece to the lead weight inside. Now that should prevent it from falling out again, and it'll keep it at the correct distance so it does not rub the drive wheels. Again, I trimmed these out so it avoids the rear ones where it sits up a little bit more. I've had it back together a few times just for testing it, and I think I finally got it to a point where it will run smoothly down the track. These were unfortunately never great performing engines, which is a real shame. They could have had something that was, if they had just made their, I think the worst thing about these is their motor design. Now this frame back here, this motor was removed from the 2904 locomotive. This was the original motor in it. Unfortunately, these motors are notoriously bad for burning up. This one is no exception. Let's take it to the tracks and I'll show you what I mean. Let's take a look. This is why I don't like these motors. So I'm applying voltage from my transformer, and trying. Doesn't want to go. Oh, you can see it starting to. Yeah, I got this to run yesterday. It ran for like 1 lap around the tracks. Now it's just doing that and it's smoking away. These motors are garbage. Well, here's where these two locomotives sit. The 2904 in the background is nearly complete. The engine runs and it's about as good as it's going to get. I don't think these were ever fantastic running locomotives. This one here up in the front, I did an experiment. I took the motor out of the 2904, which I already stated is defective, and I put it inside this locomotive. I took it all the way apart, cleaned out the motor brushes and the commutator, scrubbed it with my fiberglass pencil so it was nice and shiny. I even took the springs and stretched the springs out. That spring should have popped out when I took that off. As you can see, the springs are completely shot. So I think the real issue with these old motors is that their springs are sprung. Those springs are no good, which renders those motors defective, unless I can source some new springs. So I found this old can motor lying around in my collection of motors, and I decided to throw that into this other one because this engine, well, it never had a motor because of the same issue as that. So what I did was I took this motor and stuck it on with the same foam mounting tape and wired it up the same exact way. I found actually at my local hobby shop sells this rubber tubing. It's exactly the same tubing that came in the kit that I got from eBay, and so I ordered up, or well, I bought all the packs they had in the store, which was one, but that's a couple feet of tubing, should last me quite a while. So that I replaced the universal here with rubber tubing because the universal was buzzing quite loudly. And then the motor was also rubbing and vibrating against this mounting post for the original motor. This one I did not modify at all. I didn't put any flywheel in or nothing. It's just the motor, and it's really, really fast actually, but it runs and it runs good. Now, because it was buzzing up here, I put a piece of foam spacer just kind of stuck in there to keep it from buzzing on that, and it seems to quiet it down. This locomotive used to have a smoke unit, and I believe the smoke unit is toast, so I'm going to test that again, and then I'm going to reinstall the headlight, and I will put this motor shell back on this engine, and we're going to test both of these engines on my layout. Now that these engines are put back together, let's test the performance of each. First, I'm going to start with number 689, the 282 Mikado style locomotive. And it is pulling a Chicago Northwestern tender with a Chicago Northwestern route of the 400 passenger set made by Concor. Alright, let's see how this one does, then we'll switch over to the other one. Now let's see how the 2904 is going to perform.